Hello, welcome to Face to Face. Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking to Cliff Cornell. Cliff is a former member of the U.S. Army. He was not happy with certain things about what was happening with him and the Army, and he decided to come up to Canada. He's here now in Victoria, and as we speak, there are certain things happening with the legal situation for these young men and women who have run away from what is essentially an illegal war, an unjust war, and they've come up to Canada. And right now, our Prime Minister, Mr. Harper, is basically sending them back. That seems to be what's happening. This is getting very little coverage in the corporate media. Obviously, this is a very big story, and the people involved are very sympathetic. But clearly, the people who run this country don't want anybody much known about what's going on. But we're going to tell you what's going on. In the studio today, we have Cliff Cornell, and we're going to find out what his story is. So, Cliff, maybe you can tell us, where are you from?
Arkansas. I come from a small little town called Mountain Home, Arkansas.
How big?
I think the last time I was home, it was about a population of about 12,000 people.
High school graduate?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe you can tell us when and why you joined the Army.
Well, like I just mentioned, I graduated from high school back in '99, and I tried working different jobs. Bouncing around from job to job, trying to make it. And down in the States, it's not easy to get a good job. The best job I had was making $6 an hour. That was a assistant manager position also. So making $6 an hour, trying to pay bills, trying to pay for food and everything else on $6 an hour, it was hard. Even with my job, I had medical coverage, and out of the medical coverage, the company would pay, I believe, 60% of the medical bills, and then you paid the other 40%. Well, I went in one time to get some teeth work done, and because I figured, well, I got coverage and it shouldn't be that much. So I went in and they fixed the tooth and blah, blah, blah. And the company paid and I got the bill. It was like $400 or $500. Plus on top of all my other bills, it's like, there's no way you could pay for any type of medical and make a living on $6 an hour.
So is that kind of part of the reason, or the reason why you decided to join
that was
the military?
one of the reasons, yes, why I joined. Because what's going on down in the States is basically a poverty draft. You got all these young guys and females joining it up because the military does offer you the opportunities to better your life, college, for medical, that's including vision and dental, and depending on what you sign up for, you get either a sign-on bonus, which I got, or when I signed up, it was $9,000 for me to...
$9,000?
Yes.
Wow. It's almost like the NFL.
Well, to me, that was enough to pay all my debt. I would have been debt-free and still had enough money to give to my friends who I was living with, who are struggling to make it. She has MS, and he is just recently, retired like 2-3 years ago. So with them being that situation, medical, they're on very limited budget. I guess it's Social Security and stuff. So I was trying to give them money and trying to help them and everything else.
So when was this? So then you decided to join the Army in
Pretty much, yes.
2000 and...
I joined in November of 2002.
Okay. And what happened after that?
Well, basically, I went down to the Army recruiter because, I want to better myself. And as soon as you walk through the door, the Army recruiters got you pegged. They know exactly why you're there. They know everything about you pretty much. So they start in giving you basically a sales pitch. They're like worse than used car salesmen. They tell you anything and everything to get you to sign up. And they do it really fast. That way you don't have time to think. So I went in, and the main thing I was concerned about was I did not want to go to war. And he was like, "That's no trouble. I can write down." He wrote down CONUS on my contract.
You wrote down what?
CONUS.
CONUS. Which
CONUS. CONUS means continental.
Oh, continental U.S.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're not going anywhere.
Well, that's what I thought.
And folks, I just want to say we've heard this story before from other people. They go in and they are promised by the person who signs them up that they're not going anywhere. They're guaranteed that in some cases. But once they sign, all promises are out the window.
Yes. So you basically, he sits there after he does the contract. He goes through really quick, pointing out, well, if you try to read the contract, you can't. He won't let you read it. He's like, well, this page is blah, blah, blah. Flips over the next page. This is blah, blah, blah. Sign here. This page is blah, blah, blah. And it's really quick and fast, and you don't have time to read the contract. You don't get to see all the fine print.
And I guess you're there, they know you're there because you're interested in signing up for one reason or another.
Yes. What I like to explain to people is that the Army recruiters, they're not stationed in Beverly Hills. They're not stationed in the rich areas. They're always focused in the lower class section of the towns, because that's where they know they can get the biggest recruitment from.
Because people are joining because they
want to better themselves.
And to make a living.
Yes. And there is hardly any opportunities down in the States for anything. Jobs are getting slim, fewer and fewer every year, and it's really a struggle for everyone.
But we should mention that corporate profits during those years were running at record highs, and chief executive officers of hundreds of corporations were making multi-million dollars a year, and George Bush was giving them huge tax cuts, and basically that's the economic picture the U.S. and Canada is creating. A huge gap in wealth, so that the rich are richer, and the poor obviously are having a hard time making ends meet in the States and more in Canada as well. So you joined.
Yes.
And
so I joined.
This is November 2002.
Yes. So I done my 9 weeks of basic training out in Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Now, most of us Canadians have never been in the Army, so what was basic training like?
It was brutal. They basically have it in 3 stages. The first stage, they more or less just tear you down, strip you of everything. You have no contact with the outside, no radio, no nothing, and they sit there and for, I guess, the first 3 weeks, and they just belittle you. They strip you down, make you cry, and really do a lot of physical activities to get you in shape. And the first 3 weeks is literally hell.
Were you expecting that?
I knew it was going to be hard. But that part, I wasn't expecting it. It to be that brutal. A lot of people don't make it. I've broke down and cried at night. I had a wide range of ages in my group I was with, my basic training unit, and you're talking about 36-year-olds in basic training sitting there crying at night because it was that rough. The next 3 weeks, so the first 3 weeks is hell. The next 3 to start building you up, making you more into the soldier's mind, basically. Building you back up the way they want you to be. Basically mindless machines, more or less. And then the last 3 weeks are not so bad. I mean, by the end of the basic training, you're more to those standards. So it's a lot easier with the last 3 weeks.
So 9 weeks of basic training, and this probably brings us into 2003 now?
Yes.
Okay. What happened then?
After you get done with your basic training, you go to your school, or AIT is what the military calls it. Military loves the acronyms.
Right. What's AIT?
Advanced
Advanced
Individual Training.
Advanced Individual Training.
Yes.
So, okay, so you can sort of become a variety of different...
Yes, depending on, well, to get a job, before you join up, there's a bunch of things that you do before you're sent to the military. One of the things is you have to take this test, which is the ASVAB test. And it's tests ranging from math, English, reading, mathematics, and mechanical. So depending on what you score on that test, first of all, would determine if you can get in. Now, for the military or the army, you have to score a minimum of 15 points on this test. And I think there's like maybe 100 questions, something like that. So the military or army is 15 points. The Marines, you have to score a minimum of 50. The Army and Navy,
the Air Force and Navy?
Yep. You have to have a minimum of 75. So anyways, once you do the test, and depending on what you scored, I scored, I think it was like 56, 60 on it. So depending on that score determines what jobs are open to you, according to what the military lists the jobs by. And so I probably had 4 or 5 options. And unfortunately, I mean, I didn't know what job I picked. I just picked one. I mean, I was more thinking about, I was extremely nervous and everything else at that time. So I just picked one because he was like, oh, you signed up for this one, you get $9,000. And
which one did you pick?
It was, they call it MLRS, crew member. Now, that stands for Multi-Launch Rocket Systems.
Multi-Launch Rocket Systems. Okay,
yes.
So then you went to school and you learned how to do this.
The school is about 4 weeks. And basically you sit there in class and they show you how the machine operates, and you do a lot of book work and everything so that you know how the vehicle operates and how to operate all the other vehicles and the controls. Which, once you get to your unit, the first thing they tell you is to forget everything you learned in AIT. That it's totally useless, it's totally garbage.
Okay. So now you're in your unit.
Yes.
And what is this machine that you've learned to operate?
It's kind of like well, I guess you know what a Bradley is, right?
No, but Bradley fighting machine or something like a...
Well, it's basically a Bradley, it's like a tank.
Okay, a lightly armored...
Yes, it's a lightly armored tank.
Fighting vehicle.
But on the back
right.
of the tank, instead of having a big gun, it has rockets.
Rockets.
So you can hold up to 24 rockets.
Okay.
Or 2 missiles. And so it's a tracked vehicle, so you can go
anywhere.
Anywhere else. So that basically is what I signed up for. So by the time I got out of AIT, I was back in March of '03. That's when the Iraqi war started. So I joined way before the war ever started.
Yeah. So did you get sent to Iraq?
No, I was lucky. When I got to my duty station, which was Fort Stewart, Georgia, my unit I was supposed to be with was over in Iraq already. Lo and behold, I found out that the base they sent me to is a fast deployment base.
Now you still think you're staying in the United States?
Yes, I think I'm still safe. That
Because that's what you were told
Yep.
when you joined.
exactly. But it started coming undone back then because here I am in a fast unit deployment base. I mean, though the first base sent over to any situation, though was the first base to be sent to Iraq. So that's when things started coming together, and I guess it was later on down the road I learned that basically whatever the Army recruiter promised you don't mean shit, pardon my language, because there's a nice little clause on your contract. Remember how I mentioned how they go really fast, because there's a nice little clause saying that whatever the military promise you, they don't have to uphold it. But everything that I promised, I had to uphold. So it's basically a one-sided contract, which is totally, I mean, in my book, it's totally ridiculous having to sign a one-sided contract. And then I found out that what CONUS means, because I mean, I did bring it up later on to one of my superiors. It means Continental United States, which means that my first duty station would be in the United States.
Oh, but after that?
After that, the military can send me whatever they want. And just because you put down the CONUS, doesn't mean the military will uphold it. Just like the $9,000 enlistment bonus.
So now the war in Iraq is going on, and you are in a base where you think the next step is being sent to Iraq.
Pretty much. I was lucky the first year I was in my first duty station. When I got there, I was part of what they called the real detachment. Was the people who couldn't get shipped over because they're broken somehow, they broken leg, medical problems. So there was a great deal of people that were still left on post, and they was part of the real detachment. So the first 7-8 months, I mean, it was basically a 9-to-5 job. I mean, you wake up whenever and you go out, and depending on what duties your superiors wanted you to do, it was either mowing grass, painting the parking lots, doing post details, doing gate guards, being up there in the front, checking everybody's IDs when they come on to post, stuff like that. So that's what I did for the first 7-8 months I was in the military.
Okay, and after that?
After that, my unit got back, I guess it was about October, November of '03. So they was over there for about a year because they was sent over before March, because that's when Bush, I guess, declared war then, but they was over there already. So they was over there for about 1 year.
So they came back and you thought that, I guess, you were going.
Well, not really, not at that time. They got back, and I mean, everyone was like, well, they went, the war's going to be over with, no big deal.
Right. The war was going to be over.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Um,
Still not over.
no. So,
That's right. It was going to be over in a couple of months.
but now we get into basically of, I guess it was '04, my last year. Um, Now I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit because the one thing that the military does, okay, is they keep you so busy. I mean, you're constantly on the go. You're doing this, you're doing that, and you don't have time to really stop and think. Okay. Now, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I've seen, stuff I was taught, things I've heard from other soldiers, but it wasn't until I went home of 2004 for Christmas when I had some really good friends who sat me down and asked me, what have I seen? What do I know about the Iraqi war? And that made me stop and think. I mean, here it is. I mean, I've been in for 2 years and you're constantly on the go. You don't have time to think. You're not trained to think. You're trained to act. So here it is, they're sitting there asking me all these questions, and that made me stop and think about everything I've seen, everything I've done. So now, why I came up, well, there was a lot of stuff that happened. First of all, the returning soldiers coming back in '03. There was quite a few gruesome stories. We had officers and your superiors hiding underneath the armored vehicles and hiding behind tires because they were scared to death. You got officers who driving around with tons of water and food, and you got soldiers who only been given one bottle of water to last them all day. They had to split the MREs, which is your meals ready to eat. Little
So people weren't
base
getting
food.
enough food and water.
Yeah, and
Partly that's because a lot of that, of course, was privatized by Mr. Bush and given to, I think, Vice President Cheney's old company, Halliburton, and private companies like that, who made huge amounts of money, while the soldiers on the ground were not getting food and water.
and then there was the few people in Iraq without proper protection. They didn't have bulletproof vests. They didn't probably have helmets, and though.
I remember reading about that people's families were sending them equipment
Yep.
because the military
Didn't have
wasn't
enough.
providing it.
Yep. And then there was a few incidents where, in my unit, will basically you divide it up into 4 batteries, 4 units, basically. And so over there in Iraq, no one knew where everyone was. Okay, this unit didn't know what this unit was. This unit didn't know what this unit was. And so there's been a few times that they drove up on each other and opened fired because they thought they was the enemy. And then the last thing I remember was there was one really high officer who actually pulled his 9mm Glock out on soldiers.
On your own soldiers?
Yeah, from people who came back while they was in Iraq. So, I mean, what does that say? I mean, to me, it's like, well, here are all your superiors who's supposed to be the leaders, and they're hiding underneath, they're pulling guns out on your soldiers and stuff. So
the officers had food and water?
Yes, they had plenty. I mean, they're driving around with tons of it in the back of their Humvees, trucks, whatever.
And the soldiers had?
Soldiers only had probably one bottle to last all day, and they had to split the meals between them while the officers and everything else is sitting there chowing down.
Sounds good. So then what happened?
Well, then once my unit got back, we started training. as field artillery. I mean, that's what I signed up for, and so we started training field artillery, done a lot of different things, and I guess it was back in January of '04 that we found out that we was going to be shipped to Iraq, but no one knew when, and no one knew what job. But apparently we wasn't going over as field artillery. I mean, so you got guys who in my unit's been field artillery for 10, 15 years, and now they've been shipped over to war as a different MOS, different job. So I believe within the next 6, 7 months, we switched jobs or trained for maybe 8, 9 different possible jobs.
For example,
Like mobilized cav.
mobilized cavalry.
Cav, yes.
So
You drive around in a Humvee. You have one guy on top with a 50 cal or a automatic grenade launchers, and you got people with the M16 sticking out the doors. And you drive around, you patrols and this and that. And then we was trained to, part of that was to go in, break down doors, and haul people outside on the streets. So finally, they finally decided what they would need it. So basically, at that time, the military was changing everybody's jobs because they didn't need field artillery, they didn't need certain MOSs, but
they need mobile cavalry.
They needed mobilized cav, infantry, which is probably the main two that they need. So we finally got basically orders of what jobs we was going to do. We was going to have 3 jobs. Now, who gets what job wasn't decided in my unit. We have about 100 people. So the first was convoy security. And at that time, there was a lot of stories and stuff going around about how there was a lot of roadside bombs.
So it was
So
getting time. Obviously, you were going to be doing some job. It was coming time for either going to Iraq or deciding not to. So
yeah,
there you were.
So there was quite a few different reasons why I left. So we had different jobs. The jobs I was being sent over, I didn't totally agree with, though dangerous. I mean, I know I joined the military, the danger is going to be in war. But there was the prison security, which at that time...
Prison security?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we all know what that entailed at that point in time.
Yeah, and then there was the bodyguards for the generals.
Oh, that'd probably be the best job of all.
No, because you hear a lot of stuff that you probably don't want to hear.
So you did decide then to come to Canada?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
I just, like I said, I just sat there and had some really good folks. They're like more or less my adopted family now. And we sat there and talked, and apparently for the past few months she was in contact with the group out in Toronto, the War Sisters support group. And I didn't know anything about this group. But she done her homework. She sat there, done the research, and so when I made the decision, which wasn't the easiest choice, to come up, she let me know then that there was a group of people in Toronto that were supporting us and this and that.
So did you get a leave or something? And
I was on Christmas leave.
Christmas leave?
Yeah, I was
Christmas 2004?
Yes.
And was it difficult to cross the border?
No. We just drove up to the border, told them we was going up to see the Raptors game.
The Raptors game.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
Okay, no problem there. So
no,
in you came.
yeah.
And
They
you,
dropped me off at the Windsor train station,
right?
and I hopped on the train and took it up to Toronto.
And there were people waiting there for you to meet.
Yes. There was probably 10, 15 people there holding up signs saying "Welcome to Canada," and so we went over to their house and they had a little party there. There was another guy who came up the day before I did. So, I mean, they had a little get together there and it was really nice and welcome.
And that was basically 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've been here in Canada for about 4 years.
Yes.
You're here sort of above ground.
Yes.
You know, people know you're here. The government knows you're here.
Yes.
And what's your status now?
Status, I really don't know what my status is. I got orders to leave the country on Thursday, the 22nd.
You got orders from
Yes, the Canada Border Agency.
to leave Canada on January 22nd.
Yes.
So that's that's a week from now. That's 3 days from now.
Yes, that's Thursday. This
Do
Thursday.
you have to go to the States? Can you go to Europe?
I can go basically anywhere else. According to one sheet of paper I got from them, there was only 2 places I could not go to. I believe one was England and I forgot the other place.
Okay.
But there was 2 places that.
That you can't go. So the government of Canada is basically kicking you out of Canada now.
Yes.
On what grounds?
Well, originally I applied for the refugee status, and we was turned down because we wasn't allowed to talk about the legality of this war, which was all about 90% of our case. Because the legality of this war.
Oh, so your case to stay in Canada was that the war is illegal.
Yes.
And you cannot talk about that in.
We could not talk about it. It was thrown out during the German Heinzmann case. He was the first person.
Jeremy Heinz.
Yes.
So his case was told they couldn't, and he was before you.
Yes. So everybody else's afterwards, we wasn't allowed to talk. And I mean, the legality of this war is totally illegal because the UN wasn't even.
I mean, they lied. Everybody
Yeah.
knows that.
Yeah.
To get the United States into this war, there were no weapons of mass destruction. Nope. And yet here in Canada, to become a refugee or to get citizenship, which I've heard that most Canadians support giving you folks on the road to citizenship, and yet the government, the Harper government, is basically kicking people out.
Well, it's back in April, they passed a bill saying that to stop all the deportation of war sisters and.
That's right, the Parliament passed a bill,
Yep.
and yet.
But it's one of those 2-sided bills.
Yeah, which the government doesn't have to listen to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
very little in the media about all of this. Clearly the Canadian media is downplaying this story. It's a big story. The people involved are very sympathetic people. A lot of Canadians want them to be allowed to stay. The war is illegal. The war is a travesty. 1 million innocent people in Iraq, supposedly, have been killed by this war. The country's been destabilized, and yet Canada, Canada is kicking them out. Who is Mr. Harper working for on this issue? Why is he doing this? And what are you going to do now on the 22nd, 3 days from now?
Well,
January 22nd, when you see this on TV, this is already passed.
Well, my lawyer went down to Vancouver today to get a application of stay for me. Now, basically, it just stops my deportation until I get the chance to appeal the decisions on my humanitarian and compassion application and my parole application. The parole is the pre-risk assessment application.
PRAL.
Yes.
Pre-risk assess. And can you get that? Will he be able to get that?
Oh, we're hoping.
You don't even know. Cliff, we're out of time. Thank you so much for doing this, and good luck.
Thank you.
That was an interview we did with Cliff Cornell. He obviously is in a very critical situation for himself right now. Personally, I hope it works out only the best for him and all the other young and not so young American men and women and their children who have come here to try to escape the brutality of the Bush regime's war in Iraq and the so many other things that are happening down there. So I wish them good luck. Thank you for listening to Face to Face.